Welcome everyone to Captain's Table. We are very, very pleased to have a great group come and hear our guest Sue Howse speak today on expand your services offering to further diversify your recruitment business. Before we get started, I would like to specially recognise our supporters and sponsors, Job Adder, Ayers Group, A Positive, Digit Pro and William Buck, who you can see up on the screen. They have a huge amount of experience in the recruitment industry. So as always, I encourage you to be in touch with them to pick their brains about business improvement ideas on how they can help support your recruitment business, because that's what Captain's Table is all about. We try and have cutting edge topics that are really relevant, really practical, and bring in some of the best speakers in the industry to help you further improve your business. So thanks to our supporters. And I'm really very, very pleased to introduce Sue Howse. Sue and I work together at ManpowerGroup on the senior leadership team. She's one of the best operators in the industry in terms of group solutions. She knows a lot about solutioning of pieces of work, and I've learnt so much from her over the years. She's going to share as much as she can on this particular topic, because as you all very well know, recruitment is extremely competitive. There's very low barriers to entry, and anything that you can do to differentiate your business and stand out from other recruitment companies and from clients recruiting themselves, the better. And diversification just makes so much sense in terms of attracting good clients, good staff, good candidates, and also reducing the risk in your business. So I'm going to hand over to Sue, and Sue's going to tell you a little bit more about her background and the work that she's doing now. And Sue, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Tony. Absolute pleasure. I'm coming to you from my daughter's bedroom this morning, where the Howse house is extremely busy. We have another family member living with us at the moment from overseas as well, plus another pet. So it's rather hectic, and the dogs are going a bit crazy. So like many of us in lockdown, bear with me if it gets a bit crazy around me, but hopefully should be relatively quiet for us all. I'm going to start presenting my screen in a sec, Tony, if you wouldn't mind removing yours. The chat function's up. I encourage you to use it. If you want to put your hand up or ask a question as I go through, let's do that. There's nothing more boring than listening to me, I hope, for an hour or so. We do have question time as a part of what it is that I'll be going through with you today. Tony, if you can help with questions, if you don't mind, just monitor the chat for me as I get into things and move forward.
Yeah, sure. We can save them to the end if you like, so that you've got good flow, or if you need a pause, we can add some questions in.
Yeah, I'll have a couple of pauses anyway, but folks, if you want to ask a question, just type in the chat, stick your hand up, and maybe you gauge it, Tony, based on where we are and timing. And yeah, so as Tony mentioned, hey guys, Sue Howse. I've been in the industry for 25 years. 17 years of those with ManpowerGroup, which was my almost 2-decade apprenticeship in our industry. Started when there was, very little technology and automation in recruitment, and came from a HR and finance background. Started my first role as an on-site team manager for Compact, which then moved into HP. And through my career, I basically put my hand up for everything that I could when it came to exposure to, I don't even think they were called solutions then, they were called programs, right? And under the leadership of a couple of really key local and global experts, pushed myself into global and local opportunities for about 10 years. It's part of the executive team at ManpowerGroup when we formed the ManpowerGroup Solutions business globally, launched the Experis professional recruiting brand globally. I think I had to make a decision either to move to the US or Singapore, or stay in a country role for the next sort of 10, 20 years or so. But I decided to leave Manpower in 2017 and tried to do my own thing to start with, but was encouraged to join a small boutique RPO company, Harrier, which I ran for 2 years as well. A very different size and scale of business, but great opportunity to grow that. And throughout the last 3 years, I've been independent, advising the industry, companies like the ones that you folks own, lead and run, And then in particular in the last 18 months, a lot of direct advisory with corporates and organisations on their talent strategy, linking talent to group and company strategy, but even down to, building talent acquisition teams, helping decisions around selection of technology and tools, and anything in between too. So been a pretty amazing sort of 20 years, 25 years. Here's just a quick snapshot of the types of companies that I've worked with, both independently and with my time with both ManpowerGroup and Harrier. Big cross section there. I guess, there's not too many industry sectors that I haven't touched, but no client is the same and no day is the same in my world, in fact. At the moment, I operate my business with an associate model, and I bring experts in from my network to support the delivery I do with customers. And as Tony knows, he and I refer, customers and business to each other from time to time based on experience and capacity. But yeah, pretty decent cross section of the work that I have done and continue to do. So the intention for today, you might have, obviously read the content that Tony shared with everybody. But I think one of the things that's really important, and it always has been, but probably more so now, is identifying how to diversify service offerings to de-risk your business. And that means looking at a portfolio of your customers. How do you build out a portfolio of services? There's been some, pretty crazy peaks and troughs in the last 12 to 18 months. I think the recovery of the economy is very different to what we've experienced previously. There's significant demand for key skills and industry sectors at the moment. Everyone's talking about talent solutions. If you're not getting, I don't know, LinkedIn messages or flags every day about another company trying to source someone that's a talent solutions expert or a talent acquisition expert, I'm getting those all the time. I think I said to you yesterday, Tony, if I'd only copyrighted talent solutions about 5 years ago, I think, there'd be a lot of money in that. The question now is, what will that look like moving forward? How are companies looking to procure and buy services from the market that I think are very different and are continuing to evolve? But I think the key part here is that if you don't have the understanding and reach or tapping into the expertise to look at how to diversify your service offerings, whether that's pricing, scope of services, how you deliver, what technologies you might choose, it's likely that you're going to fall behind. And I think, many of you in operation have survived a very bumpy 18 months. It's really then how do you leverage opportunities over this next 12 to 18 months to accelerate your business and remain relevant. So that's the intent for today. As I said, let's talk things through if you need to as we go. So I'm just going to start with a bigger picture here and just look at the global lens. Please let me know if my screen isn't visible properly to you, because I can see you guys on my screen, but I think it's just the way that I've done my screen formatting. So if that's okay, I'm just going to keep going. So there's 4 key areas that I really say right now, the trends globally that the talent landscape, I'm seeing in the talent landscape. Even though, many employees have a reservation to leave work at the moment, and I think you guys are probably seeing this, companies and individuals are really looking at how to access on-demand talent more than ever before. And I know that that's been happening for some time, but that gives on-demand workers a greater choice because they're sought after more than they have been previously, and they are expecting flexibility. But it also creates access to skills for clients that they may not have traditionally been able to get into. So if they'd always looked for permanent headcount or permanent workforce, the rise of on-demand skills and capability is something that really is becoming a lot more prominent in this last 18 months, and particularly these last 6 months. I think the other part that's driving that is that, in my opinion and observations, work is what you do, not where you are. And what I mean by that is that, like today, we're all sitting wherever you are, effectively working, and you can't go past the fact that it's essential to have some face-to-face time with clients or employees or people that you work with. But I'm seeing more and more time zone-based decisions or time corridors become priorities for sourcing talent, not necessarily a location. And one client I was talking to recently that's Sydney-based, they're employing people in Coffs Harbour and Dubbo at the moment because they can transit on a monthly basis into Sydney if they want to, if they need to, but they can work effectively remotely. So looking at time zones and time corridors, even out of country, I think is becoming more and more common for organisations when they're looking at how to get access to the talent that they need. And then obviously digital collaboration is more the norm than ever as we operate in the world that we do now. The other thing that has not been any surprises for anyone on this call in our industry, we talk about the talent shortage. It's actually uglier and worse than ever. It's a chasm that's growing, and the mismatch between unskilled or underskilled workforce or people and the talent that's needed is getting bigger. Companies are really focusing on how they can reskill and accelerate reskilling and repurposing of their workforce. They know that talent is going to become more and more scarce, and immigration, not only in Australia but other countries, just isn't providing the talent channels and the talent funnels that have been experienced previously. Even though I've said work is what you do, not where you are, there's still need for in-country or in-city or in-situ workforce. So that gap is getting bigger and bigger without a doubt. And I think the other thing that I think workforce demographics has always been of interest to me, whether it be location, whether it be how workforces are pulled together, what is centralised or decentralised activities. But the hybrid workforce is the norm now, where people are likely average 3 days a week in the office going forward or at work. I also want to reflect on that there's some roles that obviously cannot be done remotely, and the challenges around that workforce are different. I think that diversity and inclusion more than ever is at the top of the agenda of organisations, even if they don't know how to positively activate their DNA strategy. They know that they need to have a more diverse and inclusive workforce. And workers are demanding that they've got a reason for purpose, that they're looking for purpose in the work that they do. We have a lens into their life now like never before. So the need for employees to have a connection to purpose with the company they work for is becoming more and more prevalent. So they're the four key areas, I think, when you think about being relevant to your clients and being relevant to the people that you work with in your business, these are the things that I generally talk about on a consistent basis with my customers and with people that I'm engaging with. I'll move on. So the other piece that I wanted to talk through was that, there are a number of things driving, I believe, how and why companies use recruitment services or build talent acquisition functions within their own business. The macro factors are economic, the industry that they work within and the sector of services that they might be working in as well. Tony and I had a chat this morning about, what am I seeing in government? I've done quite a bit of work with state government of New South Wales in the last 3 or 4 months. And I don't think there's consistency across the sectors there. But what I am seeing is that there's a heightened level of maturity in talent acquisition. They know that they need to make better decisions on what they do themselves, what organisations may choose to outsource, how they build a hybrid model for recruitment that might have an internal talent acquisition team. They might use vendors for project work, and I'll talk about the types of services shortly. And they might use, traditional and professional recruiting agencies for providing, supply for either permanent hiring or contractors or contingent workers. But I'm seeing things change quite dramatically in this last 12 months or so. What was traditionally, if you look on the left here, traditional contractors, temps, gig workers, and statement of work, those things are definitely still in existence, and preferred supplier and partner panel agreements are becoming a lot more robust. I think procurement and procurement professionals have really matured in their capability and experience in this last 5 years. I think in some organisations, they've tried to commoditise the procurement of workforce and labour, which I think has gone too far. But procurement definitely has a role in defining and putting in place the right frameworks for supplier engagement and supplier models. And then we get to this zone of, what's insourced or outsourced for contingent workforce management. And I'll talk about that a bit more as we go through. And then on the right-hand side, there's definitely traditional agency supply, professional and non-professional permanent hiring. Obviously, there's, consistent project and search work for those organisations that structure their business and delivery that way. And similarly to the MSP market or to the contingent workforce market, there's traditional RPO, full RPO models, and I'll talk about that in a bit more detail. And then we're seeing these kind of hybrid things where, companies might have a TA team, they might use a vendor or partner for project recruiting or for sourcing and screening, or they might use them for ad hoc stuff, depending upon how their peaks and troughs in business go. And similar to the maturity I've seen develop in talent acquisition, I've seen, maturity develop in procurement. I've seen maturity develop in talent acquisition as well. A little bit lagged to procurement, I think. And I think, even if you look at, as I said earlier, LinkedIn post or Seek or job ads these days, a day doesn't go past where you don't see half a dozen advertisements for talent acquisition professionals. And at the top level too, so at a director level or at a senior manager level or at a regional level, even out of Australia. So that maturity in talent acquisition, I think it can work in our favour in many ways, but I think you need to understand it in order that we know how to sell to that and how to package solutions up when you're working with a talent acquisition team or a talent acquisition leader. So to that note, we talk about total talent management and what does that look like. And I just want to highlight that what I see is this is what when I'm with my customers, the 4 key areas that I talk about in relation to when a solution will meet their needs. It's got to generally fit into these 4 criteria. And we'll explore these a bit more as I go through the next couple of slides. So number one, there's a cost element or a value. And I do think cost is different to value. And, if you want to explore that further with me, we can have a chat offline there. But cost essentially is what it is that hits the P&L or can avoid the P&L. And then the value is either value created or value earned, depending upon the decisions that are made. Compliance and risk is a significant factor for organisations. Efficiency, getting visibility of workforce and analytics to make decisions is critical. But also ensuring that, the quality and the experience is paramount, the brand is relevant, and the UX. So, we've gone past, I think, candidate experience to employee experience to human experience. So the overall experience of working with you as a provider and the experience that the candidates are receiving is absolutely critical in the eyes of many, many clients. So let's explore those a little bit now. I call these the buying triggers or the buying drivers from a services perspective. So we talked about cost, value, compliance and risk mitigation, efficiency, quality and experience. So what I've outlined here is what I believe or what I've seen as the key benefits that a hiring manager or a client might be wanting to realise by way of services that we might provide to them. So from a cost perspective, we'd be looking at cost reduction or cost avoidance. This is probably most relevant in contingent workforce programs when there's a lot of rogue spend and a lot of excessive margins that are in place. I also see clients looking at how to measure the effectiveness of their sourcing channels, both from a yield through the candidate funnel, but definitely the cost of sourcing and measuring that on a cost per hire basis as well. And then particularly looking at value adds, which I kind of hate that terminology because we all know value add in a contract means what are you going to get for nothing. I always try and price things in. Historically with some contracts, even with ManpowerGroup, we used to put in free consulting services and the consulting services had a value. So you could always quantify what the value add is that you're providing to them. So, that's always a tough conversation. I'm sure many of you have been in meetings or review meetings with the client and before it they say, can you give us your value adds? You think, well, geez, I've just given you my life for the last 3 months. What more do you want? I'm sure we've all been there. I think, so the next one is the probity, security, insurances and liabilities. Folks, I think we need to play this one up significantly at this point in time. There are so many people that are freelancing and that are looking at how they can be on-demand workers, but they don't necessarily have all of the compliance and checks and balances in place. the insurances and the liabilities in particular. I just renewed my insurances for the year, and I proactively sent them to all my clients because I think they need to know that I'm a professional organisation and that I do ensure that all of my compliance is in place. So I think that that's a key responsibility of us in our industry to demonstrate how we can support compliance and risk mitigation for our customers. Efficiency, whether that be the old metric of time to hire or time to productivity, monitoring and measuring performance of what you are providing them, and if you're providing contingent workforce, what their productivity and performance look like. And then also overall profitability, not just your profitability, but the services you're providing to the client. How does that potentially increase their profitability? I met with a client yesterday. She's been a client of mine for many years. She's just started a new role as a Chief People Officer. And it's a decentralized recruitment function at the moment. They've got about 400 vacancies. They're not doing well on the recruitment side of the business. But I looked at the lost revenue opportunity with her yesterday of not hiring those roles. And it was in the millions and millions. So an immediate business case became evident to me that if I could demonstrate to her how to build a team, how to use suppliers and partners to deliver recruitment for them, stacked up against a $6 million annualized lost revenue, it's a pretty damn compelling business case from a profitability perspective without the efficiencies and without the, effect on brand and marketing and so on. And then the fourth one is around that quality and experience, which is, how are you performing for them? How is the workers, either permanent or contractors you put in place, performing? Can you support their attraction of the right talent? Tony, we spoke about this in the last few days as well. I think some organisations fall in love with their own brand and don't possibly look from an outside-in perspective. What is their brand reputation and what is their brand perception in the marketplace? And there's, some key triggers that people in our industry know that you can look at to determine what it is that the brand recall might be in the market for your customers, whether that be LinkedIn insights reporting, where you can see the talent flows, where they're coming from and going to, whether it be Seek insights that you can gather as well around, or Glassdoor, or whatever they may be. Be aware of what you've got at your fingertips that you can put in front of your client to demonstrate their brand. I always find it's I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's less challenging to demonstrate the brand equity to a client when you can show them what their competitors are doing. So if you can look at their lens versus a competitor, I think that's important. I think so. Just to wrap that part up there, I just want to talk about the stakeholders that generally are the most interested in these key components. And the reason I break this down, we've all probably had aha moments and holy shit moments in our career, right? Where you've either done a great thing or you've stuffed something up. And I particularly recall many, many years ago pitching to what I thought was an absolute done deal, walked away, and I completely missed the point because I didn't appeal to the stakeholders, all of those stakeholders in that presentation. I can still remember the room. I can still remember how I felt when I left that meeting because I didn't really take the time to understand what the stakeholders I'm engaged with, what's important to them. And, many of you, like me, have been in the industry a long, long time, and there's nothing more important than preparation for a client meeting and debrief after a client session to make sure that you know what you're doing going in and that you debrief as you come out. And I think that's so important in looking at how to understand client pains, how to build out a solution that would work for them, how to put a commercial model in place that's right for them and right for you. And knowing how you need to play the chessboard of those stakeholders, particularly when you're selling more complex solutions. So as an example, if you're looking at a contingent workforce solution, it could be, 100 workers, it could be 1,000 workers that you're pitching for a piece of business again on. You're generally needing to look at total cost there, but also look at efficiencies. So your stakeholders are going to be probably different. You're going to have hiring managers, you're going to have procurement. So I just want you to think about that as we're exploring the conversation today. And I will just pause there, Tony, and just for a second, just to see if anyone's got any stories they want to share or any thoughts that they wanted to question at this point in time. I can only see 3 people on my screen, so I'm going to just do a little scan to see who's got their cameras on. Not many of you. Anyway, that's all right.
That's
Anything?
all right. Yeah, no, if anyone has questions, normally we get them right near the end as everyone starts to cogitate what you're
All
talking
right, we'll
about.
keep going. It's
Okay.
all good, all good. All right, let's keep going. I'm just moving my screen around a bit. I just want to talk to you about the types of solutions, and many of you will be familiar with a lot of this terminology, and some may not, or may hear it and not be able to articulate it. So, for general terms of terminology and solutions, an RPO is the outsourcing generally of an end-to-end permanent recruitment activities from either branding and attraction through to onboarding and mostly everything in between. That may or may not include the provision of technology. Many companies these days have got their own systems and tech, and then you would build out your solution and team that would complement that, may bring other tools or tech with you. And then others have nothing, or whatever they have at the moment might need to be replaced. So, an RPO doesn't have to be big and complex. It can be, for 100 hires a year. It can be for 50 hires a year. It just really comes down to what it is that you can understand about how you can implant yourself within the customer and how you build the right contract and services around that as well. The next one, which I've referred to, is MSP, or Managed Service Provider, or some call it Managed Service Program, which is management of a contingent workforce program, generally enabled by a technology of some sort, often a VMS, a vendor management system, or something similar. The key elements there is managing the supply chain. Often the supply chain includes the service provider, but in many scenarios, customers don't want the MSP provider to be a part of that delivery chain or that supply chain. I'm sure that many of you on this call today have been a supplier to an MSP or something of that sort. And some of them are exceptionally run and others are not. I think the key call outs is that an MSP would be responsible for 100% fulfillment. And if you think about those buying triggers from a client, they need to be able to appeal to all of those. So from a cost and quality perspective, often with cost savings targets and initiatives in order that you can deliver true savings and report on those savings to the business. I'm working with a large organisation at the moment. We're in stage 2 of business case design for an MSP. They have 400 million spend here in Australia on contingent workforce. And it's rather messy, but what they do know is that they've got risk profiles that they can't get their hands around at the moment. They know they're spending too much on contract labour, both from a pay rate and a margin perspective. And they also know that they're not confident with the standard of onboarding. So who's literally in the building, and I use in the building metaphorically, but who's in systems and who's at site. So those to me are distinct buying triggers for an organisation right now that obviously I've been working with, but there are others out there that have similar challenges and pains as well. It's not for the lighthearted. I think if you've never sold or delivered an MSP before, I'd advise you to get some advice on that, because first and foremost, you've got workers that you're accountable for timesheeting and paying, and we all know what happens when people don't get paid properly, and invoicing can become complex, as well as many other factors in an MSP solution as well. So if you are working with customers where you're providing contract labour or contract workforce and you can see the opportunity for exploring that, I'd suggest that you deep dive on it with them and then get some advice from either someone in the industry or via Tony or via me if that's where you're heading, because I think that it's a great opportunity to grow the business and you spend, but it's also highly risky if you haven't got it right. And then there's this whole catchphrase of statement of work, right? Service providers. I think, predominantly permeated out of IT and technology organisations, call centres, anything that you can package up and put a deliverable framework around it. I remember probably one of the biggest statements of work that I put in place early in my career was with Hewlett Packard when I ran the on-site team there and we did the national contract, and all of the engineers were on per hour or per day rates for break fix, and we converted it to a break fix paid on completion model, where we had to look at all of the previous 2 years of data and information and convert it to paying the engineers when they fixed an item rather than paying them just for turning up and clocking on and off every day. Obviously, you know, solutions have evolved and matured significantly over the last 2 to 5 years in particular. I'm not suggesting that that we as an industry go into areas where we're not deep in expertise. What I'm suggesting is that start to look at how you could package your delivery differently if it makes sense, in order that you can change the way you deliver to your client, potentially change the pricing and profitability, and also really drive the engagement and importance of engagement with your client and make that a really sticky relationship. And I'll talk about that a bit more as we go through some pricing scenarios moving forward too. Okay, and the other one that you might be hearing at the moment is on-site recruiter or recruiter on demand, or the ROD model, which is where it's kind of a nice entry, an easy entry into an RPO or to a solution. Where we did some work with a smaller recruiting firm last year, and they had some volume hiring with a particular client. And what we ended up doing was repositioning to the client to put one of their, you know, their permanent recruitment team on site. It's not rocket science, guys, and I'm sure many of you have thought about this or doing this already, but it allows you to get a lot closer to the client. Generally, you'd use their systems and technology unless they've got nothing, and you'd bring something with you. But it allows you to get close to the client, get close to HR or the executives if that's the case. And you can price things differently as well. And we'll talk about pricing again, but many organisations do this. And if you want some additional thinking around what that could look like, we can help you with that as well. So, and then the final piece is project, and project covers many things, but I'll contextualise it to permanent hiring. You might have heard terminology like project RPO, and that is where a project team might be put in place for a defined scale of volume sourcing. It could be 100 hires, it could be 50 hires, it could be 200 hires. And you basically bring the SWAT team in. Generally, you would bring your tech with you. I've seen a lot of great projects, and I'm not an advocate for any tech. I'm completely agnostic, but when I talk to clients about how to stand up a project fast, go and talk to JobAdder, because they do this stuff with their eyes closed. It's a plug and play. You can do a pretty good configuration relatively quickly, and you can deliver a project to a client. And you can decide whether or not the candidate flow goes to them for all applications or just the shortlist, so you can build your database at the same time. So there's some really cool ways to look at project RPOs. I think another one that I see, and I think this is becoming a lot more prevalent in this last 6 months because people are really struggling to source candidates, is looking at building a sourcing capability as a project team. So it might just be branding, candidate attraction, candidate sourcing and screening, and then the shortlist, bulk shortlists go over to the hiring managers or to the HR team, because clients are really struggling with getting access to the talent that they need these days. And there's probably a whole range of others, and probably folks on the call, you've got some other examples of those, but just in the interest of time today, I thought I'd just highlight those 5 key areas. If there's anything that you want to ask, either pop your hand up and Tony can let me know, or we'll save it to the end. But I thought that might help with context around terminology in the solution space as well. Now, the next section I want to talk about is, you know, many of you guys have been in business for a long time, and as have I. But my whole perspective around growth within the businesses that I've run in the past has been, there's a strategy for what you want to do and what you know you're great at and how you can leverage that and accelerate your growth and capability. And then there's this opportunistic approach as well. And often, particularly in times when there's some economic challenges, opportunities become bright, shiny things, and we chase them, and we may not actually have the expertise to do those things. And I see many companies do that. So what I want to talk about here is just think about yourself today. So your current services that you have in the current sectors that you work today. So whether that be, I don't know, finance and accounting for permanent and professional consultants. You might be IT and digital, as well as professional services for contract only. You might be in an industry sector or been in sectors where there's been a significant downturn and you've had to move and shift a little bit. So Just contextualize this with the next sort of 5 minutes as we go through this stage of the discussion. So that's where you are today. So in driving a mix and growth of your portfolio, there's a couple of ways that you can go. You could look at retaining your current services scope and look at how you can leverage that into different industry sectors. Now, many of us have done that, within current customers, where you look at how to get access to more of their spend, more of their hiring needs, and you leverage that for growth within a particular customer base. And if you have the opportunity to do that, that allows you to move out of technical and digital into finance or into HR and marketing, recruiting as well. Or it might give you the opportunity to move out of or to leverage your experience in providing tech and IT professional contractors and going to permanent hiring up the chain as well. So just think about, if it's similar services and different sector, how do I build out different sectors with the current services or current clients that I'm working with now. Oops, wrong way down. The other way to go it's not an or, it's an and. You can also stick to your sectors, what you're really strong at and where your domain expertise at, but start to look at different services. So if you think you've been doing permanent hiring for digital and IT for the last 5 years, you've got deep domain expertise and you understand that sector really well. And you're exploring with some clients the opportunity to potentially put an on-site or recruiter on demand within their business. That gives you an edge and a way into a solution delivery. It also, as I said earlier, gets you closer to the client because you've got people on site. Bear in mind, who you put on site often has the risk of going rogue as well, particularly if it's only 1 or 2 people. And by going rogue, I mean they become more the client than they are you and your business. But in saying that, by having someone closer to the client, the chances are you'll get a heck of a lot more work out of them, particularly if they're using multiple suppliers. And it might mean that you have to compromise something to get to that. So it might be that you're on a, 15 to 20% margin. Normally, you might take it down to 13 to 15% in order that you get a bigger element of that spend. Or we'll talk about pricing, but you might package it up differently. Likewise, if you're digital and IT, or if you're providing, strategy or professional services, how do you tap into the market of consultants and on-demand workforce in a way that is not highly risky to you? And I know there's a few people on the call that I've worked with through my career that, if it's your business and you have the choice, you can choose to work with people that are just company contractors, which means you don't have all the payroll tax requirements that you need to be doing. Or if you do you work with a payroll provider to do that? How do you manage that via partners and do that effectively? So as you can see, sort of going into different services, the decisions and the considerations are a little bit more complex of what you need to be doing. Where I've seen things fail is when people go straight to this. Many organisations have failed but recovered in some of these solutions that I've seen be delivered. I've been in scenarios in my career where we've won solutions and transitioned them off of competitors. And I've gone in and my team have gone in at that time and it's been a mess. And I have concerns there because as an industry, we want to be seen to be experts in the solutions that we provide. We don't want organisations to think that our industry doesn't have the capability and experience to do great work in the solution space. So it's really important, if you're going to really look at how to diversify your business, which way do you go? Do you go up and across, or across and up, or do you do both? And how do you determine which is the right way to go there? And I know that many of you on the call have got relatively small businesses, but some medium to large size teams at the moment as well. And being very selective about the sectors that you move into. I had a client recently within our industry came to me and said, there's a solution that we're looking at doing and it's in this industry. What do you think? I said, I think you're batshit crazy. Like that the talent shortage in that particular sector is horrendous. Why would you stitch yourself up trying to fill roles that are not fillable? It's actually not possible to do that. So unless there's no other way for you to grow your business, I would politely decline that opportunity, because it's the economic equation of supply and demand, right? If you can't supply the demand and you're contracted to do that, either potentially with penalties or brand and reputation risk, it's often important, the decision to say no versus it is to look at the opportunity and try and run with it and see if you can do it. I think the other thing that I encourage you to think about when you're looking at different service lines or different services is that partnering with other organisations is often the most effective way to do that. The challenge is, how do you cut the deal together? What are the commercial parameters that you put in place together to ensure that in partnering, you know your role and their role? I think I've seen some successful agreements where there's been a primary contractor and subcontractor under that, which I think is very effective. I think it allows you to bolster up your team and capability in ways that are different than trying to do it solo. And I think that, you know, I love nothing better than to work with an organisation and a client where you know that they have the same culture and ethos that you do, and you can both and all get benefit out of doing that. It comes with trust and building those relationships to do that. It also expands your opportunity for service offering diversification and also client diversification as well. So I think it's really important to start to look at peers and peer organisations that can partner effectively. And I also think that if you look at your tech partners or other service providers you work with, how can you leverage their capability and their network and their customer base to partner effectively, and vice versa. So there's a whole range of, you know, key considerations here, but the channels for growth and opportunity, I think, you know, partnering is a really effective way to do that, which I've seen success, you know, with many businesses. And then the final piece that I wanted to talk through, and this will hopefully open up some questions as well. I've done my best to try and keep this straightforward. I have seen tens, I wouldn't say hundreds, but tens and tens of different styles of pricing and commercial models and contracts. In fact, this morning I sat there and was designing a schedule of services for a client of mine. I wouldn't call it an MSP. It's a contingent workforce program of some sort, and scoping that out with them at the moment. I haven't even got to how we'll price it yet, because I need to understand the services scope before we look at how we're going to price it. And I think that's the important part. There's many aspects of what you can do as you build out solutions, but it's how you're going to wrap the commercials around that that's really important as well. So 3 areas of focus that, you know, I think some of these are probably straightforward for many of us, and that is that, you know, we've always had, as an industry and professional recruiting organisations, transactional, either dollar-based or percentage-based fees per placement or per hire. It works for both contingent and permanent, as we know, and you can usually base it on exclusive or non-exclusive pricing on the hires that take place. So pretty standard stuff, and I know most of us do that. And there's no reason why that shouldn't and won't continue. And you can even apply that to some of your recruiter on-demand models and so on as well. But as you start to build out different solutions, the way that I like to look at it is generally you want to look at some sort of management fee. A, that's great for you because you get guaranteed revenue. And B, it's good for the client because they can forecast. And I would suggest that if you're looking at a base management fee, that you do it as a minimum, an absolute minimum, to recover your costs of delivery. And I don't just mean your headcount. I mean your fully loaded people costs, your head office allocation, if you've got one, technology costs, travel costs, client entertainment, whatever you want to load into it, as if you were building out a P&L, build that into your management fee. And ensure that you know what's in scope there. If you're providing advertising as a part of that, make sure you define it as in or out of scope, if that's the case. If you're providing LinkedIn licensing or whatever else is in that, bundle it down and make sure you know what's in there and cover your costs. And then on top of that, even if you add margin to your management fee, you then start to make the cream and your margin on top of your per placement or your per outcome, depending upon how that's structured. I'll give you a couple of examples. So as an RPO contract that might have, I don't know, 200, 300 or 100 hires a year, you'd have your management fee of anything between sort of 15 to 50,000 a month, maybe, depending, or 100,000 a month, depending upon the size and scale. And then you'd say that the exclusions would be travel out of the state of where the resources are. Your inclusions would be advertising, as long as you put it all in there. Your inclusions would be your tech. I always question whether or not it's appropriate to charge margin on top of the technology costs that you put in place. Depends on how much you need to manage the vendor, right? If you've got to manage that vendor, there's responsibilities in doing that, so put a margin on it. Likewise, if you're transacting with other suppliers and invoicing for them through your invoicing system, there's no reason why you shouldn't be putting margin on that. It could be 1%, it could be 5%, and it's your decision whether you disclose that or not to the end customer. And then if you look at it from a contingent worker perspective or an MSP program perspective, mostly what I see is clients being charged a management fee, a monthly fee, an MSP fee. And then you would charge for other things like the technology implementation and configuration and maintenance of that within the systems. You'd also have a payroll margin if you're providing a payroll service. You might be supplying. If you're doing consolidated invoicing there as well, you'd probably charge a fee for invoice consolidation. And you can decide what you bundle in or out of that management fee as well. I feel that these days, as I mentioned earlier, procurement are really scrutinising many contracts. Again, it's up to you how much you disclose, right? They want to unbundle everything, right? They want to see what you had for breakfast and the statutory costs that sit within a contractor rate these days. But I think you've got the power of those decisions in the early days of negotiation. And then the other piece that's really critical when you're looking at pricing for and et cetera for an MSP would be whether or not you guarantee commitments to cost savings. Now, through my experience in, large, complex MSP solutions, anything from, 100 people in a workforce to 2,500 in a workforce under an MSP team, there is always cost savings to be found. It's just how well you know how to model that and estimate those savings and commit to delivering those savings. I had a conversation with an organisation going to an MSP negotiation recently, and I looked at the data, looked at the findings, and looked at all the information they shared with me. And I said, look, I feel confident that you could guarantee 5% savings in the first year. If you can put a return on that for you, that if you do achieve that or above, you get a bonus, that's a great thing for you guys as well. But I feel very confident that you'd be able to save them 5% based on these saving streams. I hope I'm not getting too complex with this part of the conversation, but I think as you go into these, if you're going into entering conversations around MSP or some of these solutions or contingent workforce, this is what they're going to expect to hear from you. How are you going to save me money? How are you going to quantify it? How are you going to report it? And then, procurement generally KPI'd and targeted with cost reduction, so pure cost reduction. And then there's cost avoidance things that you look at as well. So things like end date management of contracts and so on. There's a whole bunch of methodologies that I could share with you if you're interested at a later stage. And then the other part that I'd see often within both RPO and MSP contracts is some sort of risk and reward framework or penalty framework as well. Talking to another client recently, she said, what do you think about penalties or credits for underperformance? I said, just price it in. Just price it in. Give yourself some extra margin, and if you pay it out, you forecasted it. But you know what you can deliver, so price risk into your pricing fees as well. So I think the other thing that's very challenging if you're entering into new services, if you haven't been there before and you haven't priced them and done that, you kind of don't know what the benchmark is. So you know what your service is worth and the value of the work that you do. So be true to that and know what it is that your value should represent in a pricing discussion or a contract negotiation. And you'll soon find out as you progress how others might be pricing and seek feedback if you miss out on business based on a pure cost decision or whatever else that might be. And the final one, which again is often the most complex, is outcome-based pricing, which is generally delivered under a statement of work. And they're usually based on either volume, milestone, quality of delivery, and key metrics that you could quantify in the life cycle of recruitment. Or if it's not a recruitment style statement of work, if it's a pure services, you need to really spend some time looking at the requirements and itemising the service delivery with that particular client. I'm a big fan of a RACI model, so responsible, accountable, informed and consulted. It really helps define within a statement of work who is actually responsible for what. It also helps when things go a little bit off where they should be, how to work with the client to define why it went off the rails and how to get it back on track again. I think establishing that stuff up front is so important, because no one wants to throw the contract on the table when things go ugly. But if you need to, it needs to be really clear, this is the role and responsibility of you and your client. So I'd really suggest that you look at those really defined requirements up front. And then, very, very, very rare to see a statement of work type contract without some sort of KPI or SLA framework, and often with penalties. So it could be penalties based on not achieving cost targets or cost savings targets. It could be penalties based on not meeting a particular milestone for delivery, or a variety of things as well. And as I said, be really clear on what your KPIs and SLAs are. If that's the case, keep them simple. I've seen some of the most convoluted and complex KPIs and SLAs in my time. If you've got more than half a dozen, it's crazy. Because if you're going to have to report them monthly or quarterly, you want to make sure that it makes sense, it's measurable, and you can get the data that you need to demonstrate performance against KPIs and SLAs as well. I think that I might wrap up there, Tony. I know that was my last slide in particular, but happy to deep dive even further if needed. But hopefully, folks, in the last 50 minutes, I've given you some good food for thought, good things to start to consider, contemplate, and then, as you do that, circle back to Tony or myself, and be more than happy to have a separate session and walk you through things in more detail if you need to. So thank you.
Excellent, Sue. Questions, please, anyone? And just while people are getting ready for questions, Sue, I've got a couple of quick ones for you.
Awesome.
Really liked what you said about don't sell a solution that you can't deliver to, because that'll actually end up costing you money and have the reverse benefit, if you like. For people that haven't sold many solutions yet and have been continuing with traditional recruitment, where are the easy wins in the marketplace, would you say? Where would you recommend starting?
I think most definitely current customers, and I think that's a bit of a no-brainer, right? So if you've got customers you're working with at the moment that are experiencing some of those pains that we talked about, so the cost, the quality, the risk, efficiency, if you've got that right now, I think you can leverage your current relationship the most effectively. So, if sourcing and access to key talent for them at the moment is the biggest barrier to their success, particularly if it's in an area that you have the competence in, explore that most definitely and look at how you can package that up a bit differently to start to be relevant in a different way to them.
Very good. Thank you. Anybody else? People's heads are spinning. Craig.
I've got a question about SLAs, Sue. You mentioned you've seen some crazy ones and don't have more than half a dozen. Has, in your opinion, the SLAs changed in the last, say, 1 to 2 years? I mean, are there some more sophisticated or modern SLAs that people can use? Because we've recently rolled it out to a client, and so far so good, but it's challenging.
Yeah, no, I think they Craig, they most definitely have evolved over the last few years. I think that technology has played a big role in automating a lot of what you'd normally have to demonstrate by way of reporting. And there's some stuff that I think are just general hygiene things that are no-brainers, So your time to fill, your source of hire, all the traditional metrics. I think there's a transactional lens that is a given, I think, in solutions. I actually wrote a white paper about 5 years ago when I was at Manpower that talked about moving from transactional performance KPIs to outcome-based. Mm-hmm. So things like retention of hire after 3 and 6 months, brand elevation in the marketplace, how you can appeal and deliver against their strategy elements. So if you can understand let's say they've got a transformation office, right? And they've got a project team that sit there and they've got 15 projects on the go, but 2 have fallen behind. If you can give them a leg up into getting talent to deliver that project, more effectively, I would focus on that as a key deliverable and metric for performance, not just how many bums are on a seat at the end of the month.
Just another question, SLAs. Do you insist if you as a vendor have SLAs that the client have SLAs given the dependencies?
Yep. Two-way. There's got to be two-way SLAs. They're not always the most accepted in the eyes of the client, but I think you get that on the table early because your success is subject to their performance as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Anybody else? So you touched on this, but selling, there's different stakeholders involved. In larger companies, you've got HR, you've got procurement, you've got senior leadership teams. In your experience, how best to approach the sales process, given that there are so many stakeholders?
I think first and foremost, if you have a relationship with an organisation, with a particular individual or individuals, that is, that's always the best place to start, right? How do you leverage that relationship and that understanding? How do you, leverage that relationship and understanding? I think be clear on what it is that the customer pains are and try and find the source of that particular pain. So I think it's also important during let's say you're dealing with a hiring manager or a project manager or a program manager within an organisation, you need to ask them early on as you're getting into the solution conversation, what is your approval process to get a contract in place at your company? How do I support you by way of business case or findings or external information that's going to support you getting this approved? Is it a costing model? Is it a risk model? Do you have a business case template that you need to use that I can help you complete? Have you got data that you can share with me that I can analyse for you in order that I can help you demonstrate that business case? The client that I mentioned I met with yesterday, and I said, I looked at the open requisitions, the unfilled recs that they'd quantify as a lost revenue, and the business case was so evident. And I said, let's get in front of the CEO in the next week. It's a no-brainer to me. I'll package it up for you. Let's do it. So I think, leverage relationship, use data, understand what their approval process is. Don't assume that you know that. I don't know how many guys have been on this call that you think you've got the deal sold, and then someone says, sorry, procurement's got to have a go at this, and then you're delayed by 2 months, right? Ask the question early, what's the procurement process? Or what is the approval process? If you're not dealing with HR, you're dealing with a line manager, ask them what their talent acquisition process looks like. Who approves hiring? Who approves projects in the organisation? So don't assume, you got to branch out to your stakeholders as well.
Very good. Very good. Anybody else before we wrap up? Now, so you're available. Obviously, we'll send your contact details if anyone wants to have a private conversation. I know you're busy, but are you open to taking a couple of calls?
Yeah, this is my passion. I've been in the industry for as long as many of you guys on this call. So I'm all about capability in our industry. So give me a buzz.
No, very good. Thank you. All right. If we haven't got anyone else that wants to ask a question, they can, we'll be sending a copy of the recording to everyone, and we've had quite a few people that haven't been able to make it. I'm sure they're dealing with lockdown issues, but everyone will get a copy of the presentation and your contact details and the recording, Sue. Thank you very much. Just really, really well presented and an excellent framework for the whole solutions world. So thank you very much for being so generous in your sharing of knowledge. So
it's a pleasure. It's a tough gig in an hour because there's a lot to talk about. So hopefully there were some nuggets in there for everybody. If not, give me a buzz and we'll talk to you.
No, really good. And you've got quite a senior audience too of excellent regulars and new Captain's Table attendees, and there was something for everyone there. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Stay well, everybody.
Well, thanks everybody. We've got another great Captain's Table coming up next month, and we'll be giving you more details on that soon. It's going to be around the candidate shortage, which is something that's really hitting everyone at the moment, and got some good information to share with you on that for the next one. But look, thank you everyone very much for attending. Really appreciate you all being here, our regulars and new attendees. Thank you for supporting Captain's Table, and thanks to all our sponsors and supporters who I mentioned up front at the beginning. Without them, we couldn't be doing this every month. And thank you, everyone. Stay safe, and look forward to seeing you all next month. Thank you very much for being with us.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks, Tony.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
You
Well
all.
done.